The early 20th century was a time of great change and tension in Europe. The great powers such as Germany, France, Britain, Russia, and Austria-Hungary were locked in a dangerous competition. These nations were not only competing for dominance within Europe, but also for global influence. Their ambitions extended far beyond their borders, reaching into Africa, Asia, and other parts of the world. They competed for land, resources, and influence around the world. Colonies were seen as a measure of a nation's power and prestige, and the scramble for these territories often led to conflicts and confrontations. There was a sense of unease, a feeling that something had to give. Political leaders held tense meetings trying to navigate the treacherous waters of international diplomacy. Nationalism was on the rise, with different ethnic groups demanding their own independent nations. This fervor for national identity often clashed with the interests of the larger empires, leading to further instability. This was particularly true in the Balkans, a region known as the powder keg of Europe. The complex web of alliances and enmities in this area made it a hotspot for conflict. The great powers were also engaged in a massive military buildup, each nation striving to have a larger and more powerful army and navy than its rivals. This arms race created an atmosphere of mutual distrust and fear. This arms race only heightened the existing tensions. Factories churned out weapons at an unprecedented rate, and the spectre of war loomed ever larger on the horizon. Old rivalries festered between nations, fueled by historical grievances and a growing suspicion of one another's intentions. Diplomatic efforts to resolve these issues often fell short, leaving a fragile peace. Within this powder keg of suspicion, ambition, and fear, a single event would set the world on fire. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand in Sarajevo was the spark that ignited the flames of war, plunging Europe into one of the deadliest conflicts in human history. On a sunny morning on June 28, 1914, Archduke Franz Ferdinand, heir to the Austro-Hungarian throne, and his wife Sophie arrived in Sarajevo, the capital of Bosnia. Their visit was intended to be a show of strength and unity, but it ended in tragedy. A young Bosnian Serb nationalist, Gavrilo Princip, shot and killed the Archduke and his wife. This assassination, now infamous as the spark that ignited World War I, sent shockwaves through Europe. Austria-Hungary, outraged by the murder of their heir apparent, saw an opportunity to crush Serbian nationalism and assert its dominance in the Balkans. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand did not occur in a vacuum. It was a spark in a tinderbox of political tension and nationalistic fervor that had been building for years across Europe. It took place against a backdrop of a complex network of alliances that entangled the nations of Europe. These alliances were meant to create a balance of power, but instead created a web of obligations that pulled multiple countries into conflict. Austria-Hungary, furious with Serbia, turned to its powerful ally, Germany, for support. The assassination was seen as an attack on the empire's honor and stability, and Austria-Hungary was determined to respond with force. Germany, eager to assert its own growing power and fearful of Russia's growing might, pledged its unconditional backing to Austria-Hungary. Kaiser Wilhelm II saw this as an opportunity to strengthen Germany's position in Europe and was willing to risk a larger conflict. On the other side, Serbia looked to Russia for protection. Serbia, a small nation, knew it could not stand alone against the might of Austria-Hungary and Germany. Russia, bound by a sense of Slavic brotherhood with Serbia, began to mobilize its massive army, a move that Germany viewed as a direct threat. Tsar Nicholas II felt a moral obligation to support Serbia, and mobilization was seen as a necessary step to deter aggression. France, bound by an alliance with Russia, found itself drawn into the conflict. The French government, wary of German ambitions, saw the alliance as a crucial counterbalance to German power and was prepared to honor its commitments. Great Britain, hesitant at first, was ultimately compelled to join the war in defense of its own interests and the neutrality of Belgium, which Germany had invaded as part of its war plan. The violation of Belgian neutrality was a key factor in swaying British public opinion and government policy towards intervention. Thus, what began as a regional conflict quickly escalated into a full-scale world war, drawing in nations from across the globe. The intricate web of alliances and the misunderstandings between nations turned a single event into a catastrophe that reshaped the world. Austria-Hungary, emboldened by Germany's unwavering support, issued an ultimatum to Serbia, a set of demands so harsh that they were almost impossible to accept. Serbia, unwilling to bow entirely to Austrian pressure, attempted to negotiate, but to no avail. On July 28, 1914, Austria-Hungary declared war on Serbia. The declaration of war set off a chain reaction across Europe. Within a week, the continent was engulfed in war. Germany, following its carefully crafted Schlieffen Plan, launched a lightning attack on France through neutral Belgium, hoping to knock the French out of the war before Russia could fully mobilize. Britain, outraged by the violation of Belgian neutrality, declared war on Germany. One of the most tragic aspects of the road to World War I was the failure of diplomacy. Despite numerous meetings and discussions, the leaders of Europe were unable to find a peaceful resolution to the mounting tensions. The intricate web of alliances and treaties that had been designed to maintain peace instead became a trap, pulling nation after nation into the conflict. In the crucial weeks following the assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand, a series of miscommunications, miscalculations, and missed opportunities sealed the fate of Europe. The assassination, which was meant to be a local issue, quickly escalated due to the complex web of alliances and the lack of clear communication between the powers. Each nation, acting on incomplete or misunderstood information, made decisions that pushed the continent closer to war. Austria-Hungary, blinded by anger and a desire for revenge, failed to consider the wider consequences of its actions. Their ultimatum to Serbia was harsh and uncompromising, leaving little room for negotiation. This aggressive stance was influenced by their desire to assert dominance in the Balkans, but it ignored the potential for a larger conflict. Germany, eager to assert its dominance and fearful of a two-front war, encouraged Austria-Hungary's aggression, believing that a swift and decisive victory was possible. Kaiser Wilhelm II and his advisors miscalculated the reactions of other powers, particularly Russia and France. They underestimated the willingness of these nations to come to Serbia's aid and overestimated their own military capabilities. The leaders of Europe, caught in a web of their own making, failed to grasp the full gravity of the situation until it was too late. Their decisions were often based on outdated notions of honor and prestige, rather than the harsh realities of modern warfare. The diplomatic channels that could have provided a way out were clogged with mistrust and miscommunication. By the time they realized that war was not the answer, the guns were already firing and the world was on an unstoppable march toward catastrophe. The trenches of World War I became a symbol of this failure, where millions of lives were lost due to the inability of leaders to communicate and compromise. The lessons of this tragic period remind us of the importance of diplomacy and the devastating consequences when it fails. The system of alliances, meant to deter war, instead acted like a line of dominoes. Austria-Hungary's declaration of war against Serbia triggered a chain reaction of declarations. Russia, obligated to defend Serbia, mobilized its troops, which in turn prompted Germany to declare war on Russia. Germany's invasion of Belgium, a neutral country, led Britain to declare war on Germany. Within a week, all of the major powers of Europe were at war, their citizens caught in a conflict that few understood and even fewer desired. World War I was not simply the result of an assassination or a series of alliances. It was the culmination of decades of growing tensions, rivalries, and fears. The assassination of Archduke Franz Ferdinand was the spark, but the tinder was already dry. Nationalism, imperialism, militarism, and a complex web of alliances all contributed to the outbreak of war. The leaders of Europe, blinded by their own ambitions and fears, failed to find a peaceful solution to their differences. They underestimated the destructive power of modern warfare and the profound impact the war would have on the world. World War I was a global conflict that had a profound impact on the 20th century. The war led to the deaths of millions of soldiers and civilians, devastated economies, and redrew the map of Europe. It led to the collapse of empires, the rise of new ideologies, and the creation of international organizations like the League of Nations intended to prevent future conflicts. The war also had a profound impact on technology, art, literature, and the human psyche. It ushered in an era of uncertainty and change, leaving an indelible mark on the world. World War I stands as a stark reminder of the devastating consequences of unchecked nationalism, militarism, and the failure of diplomacy. It is a reminder of the importance of understanding history, the dangers of unchecked ambition, and the need for peaceful resolution of conflict. As we remember the millions of lives lost and the countless others forever changed by this global conflict, let us strive to learn from the mistakes of the past and work towards a future where dialogue, understanding, and cooperation prevail.